Welcome back to Murderous Minds Monday, where we cover the most sadistic and heinous crimes of the modern day serial killers. Today's case, we are going to be looking at Trevor Hardy, who is nicknamed the Beast of Manchester. And today's case is related to New Year's, so happy New Year's everyone. I hope you all had a lovely Christmas. But yes, today's case is a bit dark and twisted, so if you want to hear more about Trevor Hardy and the murders that he committed, just keep on watching. Trevor Joseph Hardy was born on the 11th of June 1945, and he was the second youngest out of 4 siblings. There's not really much known about his childhood and his upbringing. All that we do know is that he was subject to the hands of his abusive alcoholic father and a mother who was just unable to protect her son. From a young age, he was described as a bully at school, and even his own family described him as a bully, so he bullied everyone. There is evidence that his criminal career may have started as young as 8 years old. He would steal things from shops, from other people's houses. He was just a menace to the town that he lived in. So he grew up in Lancashire in Manchester, and the theft was a compulsion that would later manifest into assault when he was sentenced to 5 years in jail for wounding a man with a pickaxe at the age of 27. The guy that he attacked was simply just trying to pay for a round of drinks for him, and shortly after his early release from Isle of Wight Albany jail in November of 1974, he would go on to commit his first murder. Trevor Hardy committed his first murder on New Year's Eve of 1974, hence why I picked this case as my New Year's case. His first victim was 15-year-old Leslie Jane Stewart, who he stabbed and mutilated before he buried her in a shallow grave in Newton Heath, Manchester. He had actually mistook Leslie for another schoolgirl that he had become infatuated with. He stole the ring off of Leslie's finger and later gifted this to another woman as a symbol of his love for her. For weeks after the murder of Leslie, Hardy would keep returning to the place that he buried her, and he would savagely rip apart her body with his bare hands before scattering the parts around the city. This was a sadistic attempt to make it harder to find her, because obviously if her body's everywhere, it's going to be harder to identify her. And it would actually take 2 years after the murder for Leslie's family to actually learn of her tragic fate. So Trevor Hardy's crimes actually overlapped with those of the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe's, and there were similarities between the two which caused widespread terror because they happened around the same time and they were quite close to each other. Manchester and Yorkshire are not too far apart. In neighbourhoods such as Moston and Blakely, women were reluctant to go out alone after dark, and men would be asked to escort them home from nights out. So there'd be men walking women home just so they weren't walking home on their own. See, I would even be scared in groups just to go out if I'd known that that was going on, or I don't think I could. The following year, Hardy attacked another woman and murdered her. In July of 1975, there was another body that was discovered in Moston. This was the body of 18-year-old Wanda Scala. She had been walking home from work at a hotel where she worked as a barmaid when she was savagely hit over the head with a paving stone, sexually assaulted, and then he strangled her with her own tights. Hardy then went to bite off one of her nipples, and he kept this along with her blood-stained handbag as a trophy of this murder. Soon after the death of Wanda, Hardy confessed to killing her to his younger brother Colin. This was during a pub night out where they were just drinking, and Colin later said that he didn't know if his brother was actually telling the truth, and then things got really tense. They went back to Colin's house, and the next thing Colin knew, he was being beaten by Hardy. Hardy ripped off Colin's clothes and battered him with a phone before finally leaving him senseless and covered in blood on his own stairs. There was blood everywhere. It was all over the ceiling, all over the walls, and Hardy prevented Colin's wife from getting him an ambulance or helping him in any way. She just had to leave him there. Trevor then walked out and returned 10 minutes later as calm as anything and just cooked himself some beans on toast. Colin's wife was petrified at how calm he was after this assault, and he just sat calmly at the dining room table, chit-chatting away, eating his food as if nothing had happened at all, while Colin was still lying unconscious on the stairs of his property. The following day, Colin did go to the police with his wife, and Hardy was arrested for the murder of Wanda. However, this wouldn't be the end of his murderous rampage. He arranged for his girlfriend to give him an alibi, and in order to prevent himself from incriminated, he filed his teeth to a point so that his teeth didn't match those of the bite mark on Wanda. Just disgusting. He did this by getting a file from someone while he was actually in police custody, and did it while he was with the police, and no one stopped him. Sharon Mosoff became Hardy's victim number 3. She had just left Failsworth School and was working at a kitchen firm based at a mill close to the family home. She had actually rung her father the night of her murder on her way home to confirm the bus number that she needed to get back to his house. Had it been any earlier in the day, Sharon's father would have driven the 10-mile drive to collect her. Instead, he just told her the bus number that she needed to get. He left the door on the latch and left some glass bottles behind the door so that when she returned home, the bottles would fall over and he would know that she'd returned home. However, that reassuring clink of the bottles hitting the floor never came. A police officer in a van had seen that Shannon get off the bus, and she was only 5 minutes from her father's home. She crossed paths with a man who would later end her life. Hardy was hiding in the doorway of where she worked, trying to break into the store. Her body was then found the next morning in the Rochdale Canal by someone working at the nearby dairy. It was a cold night in March 1976, and the canal had actually frozen around her body. And once again, he had bitten off one of her nipples. After this murder, Hardy went on the run, and he lived rough in Broadhurst Park, and he was also responsible for another violent sexual assault on a woman in a pub toilet while he was living rough. This assault was on 21-year-old Christina Campbell, and she was able to provide police with crucial clues following miraculous escape from Hardy. Hardy was finally arrested in August of 1976, and he confessed to the murders of Wanda and Sharon. He then finally confessed to the murder of Leslie, and when he confessed to this murder, this was the first time police realised that Leslie was not a missing person, and they didn't know that she'd actually been murdered because they hadn't found her body. So until that moment, they still thought she was just a missing person. At Hardy's trial, he actually fired his attorney and attempted to represent himself in court. And he basically admitted to manslaughter instead of murder on the grounds of diminished responsibility. So basically saying that he was insane. However, this plea was rejected and he was found guilty of murder. And on the 2nd of May 1978, Hardy was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences. He would remain in Wakefield Prison in West Yorkshire until his subsequent death on the 25th of September 2012. It's actually reported that he had like a record of good behaviour in prison, which I find very hard to believe when even at the age of 8 he was known as a bully. I don't know how suddenly going to prison is going to change that, but that's what's reported. He always maintained his innocence, and in a letter that was sent to the Mosif family, he basically blamed them for their daughter's death and said that it was the actions of the parents that led to her death. Like, if they picked her up, she wouldn't have died. Crazy. Could you imagine receiving that? I would be absolutely fuming if that was me. After the death of Hardy, his brother Colin inherited letters and documents that he'd written while he was in prison. Amongst them were countless letters that he'd actually written to authorities, and in many of those letters he retracted his confession over the 3 murders and tried to convince authorities that the murders were actually committed by his brother Colin and that he was responsible for the unsolved murder of Dorothy Layden. Colin hadn't seen his brother since he had been sent to prison, and although authorities had dismissed the accusations by Hardy, it caused people in the community, there was a shadow of doubt over Colin, and there was always that suspicion in their mind that maybe he was a murderer as well. Hardy had tried to frame Colin because he felt bitter resentment towards him, as after the murders Colin alerted the police, which later led to his arrest. For this act, Hardy hated his brother and always wanted revenge, which luckily he never got, and he stayed in prison until he died, where he should be. So he got what he deserved. But that is the end of today's case. I said it was going to be a sort of New Year's case. Obviously, he committed a murder on New Year's Eve, in 1974. So let me know what you think of Trevor Hardy. Do you think he actually committed these murders as much as he said he didn't? I 100% think he did. There's no way you would file your teeth and things like that to try and move suspicion to someone else if you're not guilty. But let me know if there are any other cases you want to see me cover next year. I hope you all have an amazing new year. I hope you had a lovely Christmas as well. But yeah, I will see you in the new year for another video next week for a Murderous Minds Monday.